Hey, college students. The future of our democracy urgently depends on us. You can help on-air student leaders curate trusted information on governance and elections and provide an online town square where we can all talk with politicians and each other to find common ground on issues and legislation on us.onair.cc. Our sponsors tonight are Democracy on Air, a nonpartisan nonprofit that supports the U.S. on-air network of 50 governance and election hubs, and GMU Students on Air, which oversees the GMU on-air chapter and the U.S. on-air network.
Good afternoon. My name is Frida Cervantes, and I will be your host for today's Aircast with candidate Jim Myles. To start off our Aircast, we produced a 1-minute video on candidate Jim Myles' biography and his policy positions based on his campaign website. Students on Air at GMU introduce Jim Myles. Jim Myles is the Republican candidate for Virginia's 11th Congressional District. Myles grew up in a small Michigan town where he was one of 5 children. He would later go on to continue the family tradition of joining the United States Air Force, where he served as a pilot instructor and worked for over 2,100 hours. Myles later became a United States federal judge. He has been married to his wife named Deborah for 22 years. Jim Myles' policy positions include a tough on crime stance. He strongly opposes excessive spending, has a firm immigration reform, and supports completion of the wall, and believes that censorship is a growing, dangerous threat to the American public. He also supports our police and wants to ensure Social Security is available now and onward. Myles says, "We need to come back together and unite around the values that made America the greatest country ever." Go to va.onair.cc to learn more about Jim Myles, and go to us.onair.cc to sign in to talk with your candidates and to learn more about the most competitive congressional and governor races, and to get the latest information on U.S. politics and governance. Welcome, candidate Jim Myles. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your Aircast.
Of course, it is our pleasure. To start off our Aircast, we wanted to ask a question about democracy. So one of our mission statements of our organization is the general promotion of democracy, particularly with college-age voters, but the general public as well. So the first thing we wanted to ask is, how do you think the public can become more engaged and impact our democracy?
It's a very important topic. I think the first thing is to really be involved and engaged and educated, and that involves doing some hard work, reading the paper, watching the news, doing the research. I know with the internet, things are, I think, a little bit easier, but it's still, work needs to be done. I know oftentimes out on the campaign trail, I'll run into people and I'll ask them about, kind of just some basic issues and facts. And I find a lot of them are not really that familiar with some of the even the major points, much less the nuances, and they're going out to vote. And I just wish people would make a greater effort to be more involved in different sources of information are out there. If you're in college, you can join, I know at George Mason, the College Republican Club. I've been there and spoke to them, and I'm sure that there's a Democrat club. So, me, I would rather have you join the Republican Club, but that's very good to become involved. And we do, I've been able to visit with them and answer questions. And of course, I do the same for the Democrat club there, and that's a good thing to do as well. You can also volunteer to be on a campaign. You can volunteer to help out my campaign, do door knocking, things like that. You can put a sign up in your yard. There's ways to get involved and just interact with other people on the campaign trail, and you get a chance to talk to candidates, prior, current, and just learn more. And I guess the last thing, you can even volunteer to be a poll watcher. There's positions within the election process, and all those are open and available, and actually they're very much needed, especially here in our congressional district. The 11th is huge. There's like 175 odd precincts, and to staff all of those is quite a challenge for everybody, all the campaigns. So that's something I would encourage. But that's just kind of a general overview. But politics is so important. It decides, the policies that guide our lives every day. And so we need to all be involved and be informed. And that's what I say about that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Sure.
My next question for you is about gun control and the Second Amendment. There's a lot of disconnect on both sides on the issue of gun control and those that are that do support Second Amendment. So how would you propose kind of building a bridge to find some sort of compromise on the issue?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think again, a federal judge, I support and defend the Constitution. I've put up my right hand many times, and I think unfortunately a lot of times I think some public officials aren't doing as good a job of following that oath. And we'll just leave it at that. But I do that. But I look at the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is a Second Amendment right, but there's no absolute rights. With free speech, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. We all know that. So it's trying to find a common ground that we can use and still protect us. In background checks, universal background checks, we already have those. I'm certainly not opposed to those at all. I think they're really an important thing. In concealed carry, I'm also very much in favor of some kind of training that you have to prove that you know how to use a gun before you can carry one concealed in public, just for the safety for all of us. But I think, and it's very much related to the gun control issue, is the bigger issue of crime. What we're seeing in our country is it's really getting scary living in America. And I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. You watch the news, you see people are getting pushed in front of subways. You look in our cities, the police drawdowns. We had riots, and people, shootings. I mean, it's getting pretty dangerous out there. And the people that are buying guns right now, a lot of them are minorities and women who just don't feel safe anymore. So I think we really need to try to do the best we can. We need to correct this crime problem that's just taking over so many major cities, and it's hitting us here in Fairfax County as well. And I can't blame anybody these days that doesn't want to arm themselves, because it's really getting to be a dangerous world out here. And until we fully staff our police, fund our police, and until we start to lock up criminals and put them away instead of turning them back out into the streets, which is what is going on here, I think people have every right to want to keep and bear arms to protect themselves, their families, and their businesses.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
My next question is that on your campaign website, you stated that you are pro-life, but do
Yes.
support women who are facing unplanned pregnancies and the challenges that they may face. So I was wondering if you could kind of expand on what you mean by that.
Okay, sure. I'd say I'm pro-life. I really believe as a society, we all want to favor life. We want abortions are not anything to be cheered. A baby is dead, and sometimes the mother will have regret. So it's certainly something that we want to avoid at whenever we can. But I also do believe certainly there is some instances in some cases where an abortion is a medically appropriate procedure, and it's still a tragedy. But sometimes it is necessary. So I would never say that we could never perform abortions. I just think that's wrong. I think what we need to do as a society is just work for life, be pro-life. And as a legislator, that's what I would try to do, is provide resources and support to programs for women that find themselves in unplanned pregnancies, and try to offer them alternatives for life that might be better for them if they get the support that they need and we can provide. So I guess I just say that I would always try to have choices for life and offer choices for life, but certainly in some cases, abortion would be medically appropriate. And I think the Dobbs decision rightfully returned that decision back to the states. And so we can all decide together as a community what we think those very, I would say, limited circumstances are that abortion would be medically appropriate. And we can agree hopefully on that, because this is an issue we all know it's very hard to agree on. There's people that have the value that the fertilized egg is a baby and should be afforded the rights of every individual. And then you've got other people like my opponent that really place no value on that fetus until after it's born. Even the day before it's born, it has no value. And I think with such differences in values, it's really hard to come together to a consensus. So it's very important for the society, in that varies in different states. And that's what makes the Constitution, to me, such a great document, is it does reserve to the states those rights that aren't enumerated in the Constitution. And this is certainly one of them, as the Supreme Court decided very recently.
Thank you. And
Sure.
my last question for you is, on your campaign website, you stated that you want to improve our immigration system.
Yes.
We want to keep our borders safe.
Yes.
So what, if any, actions would you support in creating a pathway to citizenship?
Okay, well, that's kind of two questions. I guess the first question I would say is I think we really need to secure our border. I think there's a humanitarian crisis that's going on right now. Hundreds of people are dying, and sexual assaults are commonplace. The human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the drug cartels, now they're dumping prisoners at our southern border. Terrorists are coming in. It's just really a horrific situation, and it's all caused by Biden, Pelosi, and Connolly and their open borders. I think it's madness. We need to have national security. We need to have a secure border. I think we can have a secure border. It's a combination of many different things. I've heard, actually, I was at an event there at George Mason a little while ago, a forum, and it was discussed with, there was, some technology with drones and things like that and different ways to secure our border. But I think everybody agrees that we need a secure border to protect our national sovereignty and our interests. Now, as far as a pathway to citizenship, my belief is that if you're here illegally, there's no pathway to citizenship, because you're kind of, people say, a line jumper. And it really, if you get out and talk to people that have done here, come here and become legal residents and then citizens, they went through a lot to do that. And they're very much offended, and I think rightfully so, by people that just think that they can come in here illegally and then become citizens. What I would propose is, I think that someone that is here illegally, that just wants to stay here and work, and a lot of people might want to do that and send, money back to their country of origin, that they can do that. And maybe they want to go back there eventually, when they get older, retire. I don't know. Every case is different. But we would not necessarily deport people like that. I mean, if they're criminals, terrorists, sex offenders, and they're out there, believe me, we need to get rid of those. But that necessarily wouldn't be anything, but they wouldn't be eligible for our government benefits. If they don't want to become citizens, then they don't have any entitlement to our government benefits. And that would be a choice for them to make. And it would be totally up to them to make it. But I would offer a path to citizenship if people are here illegally and they want to become U.S. citizens and do it right, that they would leave the country, and then we would process their paperwork, and they would be vetted to make sure they're not terrorists or criminals or drug abusers. And then they could enter the country legally, and then they would be on a path to citizenship. And we need new citizens. I'm very much for immigration, but it has to be legal, because we're a country of laws and a country of rules. And if we don't do this right, then our whole country suffers. But we can bring people in and make them come in legally and welcome them as citizens, and they would certainly enjoy all the rights and benefits of any United States citizen. And I think that's it. There's certainly no perfect solution. It's a difficult situation, and it's been exacerbated greatly by the policies of Biden, Pelosi, and Connolly just in the last 2 years. So it's going to take a little bit more to clean this up, so to speak, but I think we can do it. And I think it will help all the communities. It'll help America, because we need young workers for our Medicare and Social Security benefits, and people that really want to become citizens, they'll have a path to do that legally.
Thank you. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm going to open up the floor for the student panelists. Our first student is Devin Pieczynski. He is a global affairs major. Devin, the floor is yours.
Thank you for joining us today,
Thanks, Devin.
candidate Myles. My question is related to the war in Ukraine right now. I'm wondering if you think the U.S. is doing enough to support Ukraine.
I guess the first thing I always say is I did work up on Capitol Hill as a fellow, and I was a former Air Force. I was an A-10, a fighter pilot. And I know a lot of what you think is based on the intelligence that you have to evaluate a situation. And I'm sitting here in Burke and in my office, so I don't really have any special intelligence on the situation in the Ukraine. But what I do read, I think, is the Ukrainian people are battling valiantly, and I certainly stand with them. I think the Russian invasion was wrong, and Putin, I think, has suffered greatly his reputation in the world. And I would say that I don't necessarily support an expansion, but I think we can continue on our current course. But we do just need to make sure that there's an accounting, just to make sure that the materials that are being provided are being used properly and efficiently. And I think as taxpayers, we all want to make sure that what we're supplying is being used for the purposes that it was allocated and allotted.
Thank you, candidate.
Sure. Thank you.
Our next student is Ben Murphy, a political science major. Ben, the floor.
Hello, candidate. Thank you for joining us.
You bet.
My question has to do with polarization. As I'm sure we're all aware, it's an increasing problem day to day. And I'm curious from your perspective, do you think that this is an issue that constituents should kind of be relying on their elected officials to solve? Should we be expecting our elected officials to maybe try and moderate themselves in a lot of areas and compromise more in government? Or is this really something where constituents themselves need to moderate and kind of try and decrease the polarization that way? Or is it maybe a joint effort? I mean,
Yeah.
what is your perspective on it?
That's really good. That sounds like a good paper topic in one of your political science classes. It really does sound like an interesting group of issues. And I agree, the polarization is really getting significant. And people ask me when I'm out on the campaign trail, it's like, how has it gotten so polarized? Why are you Republicans, always so intransigent and difficult to deal with? And I go, as a Republican here, I don't think things have really, I'm not really trying to get anything new or more. It's usually just I'm trying to defend what I think are American values, basic bedrock values that have made America great. And they're under assault every day from the Democrats. So I find I'm always playing defense. But you can also play defense. And I try, was a former federal judge, I've said that before, and I try to certainly treat everyone with courtesy and respect, because you can agree to disagree. But going more to the heart of your question, I think it does need to start at the legislative level. They're the leaders of our country. And I think that they can do a better job to work together and at least not be so acrimonious. It's been so bitter, but there's certainly political leaders on both sides that I think foster that kind of tension, maybe to enhance their own visibility and their own political careers. And I'm hoping that the leadership, the new leadership in the House, I suspect the Republicans are going to have a new majority in the Speaker, and in the Senate the same. So we'll see. And I'll look to hopefully the Republican leadership to try to work more closely and have better relations with the Democrats. But again, they need to start to consider, the Republicans. We're just trying to protect, I think, our way of life, and they're trying to I think, radically change it. And it's really gone so far left. Even Democrats are leaving the party. And I think that's really a sad comment on where the Democrats are today. But I'm hoping when the Republicans and the Democrats up on the Hill, if they can work together better in the Supreme Court, we can also see sometimes that's one of the better places where people can really disagree and still have good working relationships and be friendly. That'll kind of trickle down, into the states and into the regions. And hopefully we can do that better, because I know it's very contentious here in Fairfax County. In my experience, the polling places, you have poll watchers and election officers, and you've got their tent and our tent. And it's very difficult. But I do think leadership begins at the top, and we need better leadership in Congress to try to work together. But again, I call on Democrats, and I know they're going to say nothing's going to change, but we're just trying, I think, to protect what we have in the basic American values. And those are just under assault, and it just makes it very difficult to compromise when you're just giving up and not getting anything in return. I hope that answers your question. It's certainly a difficult one. I wish.
Yeah. I mean,
really, really tough question.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we find ourselves battling with that every day, and there's no clear solution, obviously. As a bit of a follow-up, I guess I'm curious, would you expect in the next 10 years, say, for our level of polarization to increase or decrease then? Or remain the same?
Yeah. I think a lot depends. Just what I think, kind of personally, is everybody in America's been doing really well lately. Our economy's been doing really well, and we're on a path where most people, and we're kind of being divided because a lot of us have what we need. And I'm just thinking, maybe if I look back at 9/11, I don't know how old you were, if you were even born then, but it was like everybody came together. So I don't know if we're going to have some kind of major event. I hope we don't. That's going to unite all Americans as Americans, where maybe we're threatened in some way. I'm a little bit concerned with the Korea situation, North Korea, Russia, and it's going back all the way to the 50s and 60s with those threats. So I hope it doesn't happen, that there might be something bad that would be good in the sense of bring all of Americans together. But I also hope that they can work together. We're kind of seeing, I think the left has really taken over the Democrats, and a lot of the policies, I think, are showing themselves not to be really workable or helpful or good for our kids or our families. So maybe things will swing back to the middle, because I think that's where we all want to be, is kind of, I'm definitely a right center. And to be honest, some of my family is left center and even a little bit more, I think. But I'm sure all of your families and friends, you're the same. We can't all agree on everything all the time. That's just not realistic. But we need to be able to communicate and show courtesy and respect for everybody. And that's what I do my very best to do.
Great. Thank you for the response. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions.
And our last student is Anna Jonckheer, a political science major.
Hello, candidate Myles. Thank you for
Hi.
speaking with us today.
You bet.
I have a bit of a broader question. My question is, why do you believe it's important to get young people and students involved in the democratic process?
Well, I just think it's because it's your future. To have a lot of people here in their 60s, 70s, I mean, we talk about age limits and term limits, but their interests are different than your interests. I always say, do you know how much your debt is right now? Every man, woman, child, student, baby is like upwards of $90,000. And it keeps going up and keeps going up because of this deficit spending. And we need to elect politicians, and that's hard with Republican or Democrats that don't want to spend other people's money. And people have talked about a balanced budget amendment, and we might be getting closer to that. But I think it's your future, and it's really important that you become involved. And I can't preach to you. When I was, 18, 19, I was a political science major at Central Michigan University, and I was, I had fun. I studied hard. I got good grades, but, politics, I didn't really, because you live in a world when you're in the university system, at least most people, you don't have to worry about where your next meal's coming from. You're not paying taxes. Your car's probably registered, your tuition's paid, and if you borrow, you don't have to worry about it later. So I think as you get a little older, all of a sudden you kind of get a wake-up call that there's a lot of policies that really have an impact on your life that you just don't see when you're in the college bubble. And again, I'm not criticizing anyone at Mason or in college, because I was certainly the same way. But I think we see that when we look across the country. We see these institutions of higher learning have gone so far left, and it's very easy, I think, with young people that don't have to face things that a lot of us working people and parents have to deal with, these policies that are just so harmful to our families and our economy and our safety. And when you're in the university or the school situation, it's a pretty safe world, and you don't really see that until you get out. So that would be my answer, is you need to pay attention, because you're going to step into the fire here, and you might really change in a lot of, to be honest, a lot of people change as they age to a different political party.
Thanks for your response.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our college students for your participation today. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
Just thank you for joining us. I appreciate the responses.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd also like to echo that. And thank you so much, candidate Myles, for your own participation. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I would just like to thank you first. When I spoke at George Mason, I've been going to college my whole life. I guess I went to law school. I was 31 and taken some master's classes, and I really enjoy talking to young people, because you have a very fresh perspective. And sometimes I forget the challenges that you face that are really serious and important challenges. So I always like to talk to young people. On my website, you've already known that. You've been quizzing me on it, so I appreciate that. But yeah, the election's coming up Tuesday. And like I said, if you want to help out with door knocking, anything like that, you can certainly reference my website. But feel free to email me with any of your thoughts or concerns. And I'll hope to see you. Like I said, I'm at your campus there pretty much every day. And maybe I'll see you around there. So, but thanks again. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you and hear what was on your mind.
Thank you so much for your participation. And this concludes our Aircast. So thanks again, everyone.
All right.
You can learn more about the US On Air network by going to us.onair.cc and select one of the About posts. You can find a video recording of this Aircast in our US and Virginia On Air YouTube channels and in VA On Air posts.